Good evening, and welcome back to SleepWise. Tonight, there is nothing you need to solve and nothing you need to hold up in your mind. Let the day loosen its grip. Let your jaw unclench, let your tongue rest, and let your shoulders sink as if they've been waiting for permission. If you're lying on your back, allow your arms to fall a little heavier into the bed. If you're on your side, let your knees find a comfortable angle and feel how the mattress meets you without asking anything in return. Take one slow breath in through your nose and a longer breath out. Again, softly. The world can keep turning while you do less and less, until doing becomes simply breathing. Out beyond your walls, the night has its own gentle lighting. The moon is there, not making its own fire, but returning sunlight in a softened echo. It's a quiet kind of brightness, the sort that doesn't demand attention, only offers a presence. And this is where our story begins, with calm physics that feels almost like a lullaby. The moon circles Earth at an average distance of about 384,000 kilometers, close enough to feel familiar, far enough to keep its mysteries intact. Its surface is dark in the way of old stone, reflecting only a small fraction of the light that reaches it, yet still bright enough to draw a pale line along a cloud edge, or turn a window pane into a thin sheet of silver. As it travels, it turns as well, in a way that keeps nearly the same hemisphere facing Earth. It's not that the far side is always dark, only that it's usually hidden from our view. From night to night, the moon seems to change shape, but it's really changing illumination. The phases are geometry, not mood. A crescent, a half, a full round lantern, all determined by the angle between sun, moon, and Earth. The moon completes an orbit relative to the distant stars in a little over 27 days. But the cycle of phases returns closer to 29 and a half. Because Earth is moving too, carrying you forward around the sun. Even the distance shifts gently, drawing a little nearer, then drifting a little farther, and over a long time the moon edges away from Earth by a small amount each year. Tonight, we'll follow these rhythms the way you might follow a slow tide. We'll notice how gravity doesn't yank, but whispers, how the oceans respond with patient rising and falling. Time is kept, not with ticking, but with repeating motion. You don't need to remember any numbers or hold on to any detail. Let the facts drift past like soft lanterns on dark water. If your mind catches one, that's fine. If it lets go, that's even better. For now, stay warm. Feel the blanket settle. Listen for the smallest sound in the room, and let it become part of the background. Above it all, the moon continues its calm orbit, and you are safe to rest beneath it. Moonlight is a borrowed thing, and that is part of why it feels so gentle. It doesn't arrive with the sharp insistence of noon. It arrives as an echo. Sunlight that has already traveled a long distance, touched an old surface, and returned softened. Deep inside the sun, energy is made in a steady furnace, and the light that eventually finds the moon begins there, long before it ever reaches our night. By the time it meets the moon, it has become a quiet stream, and the moon keeps most of it. The lunar surface is not bright, like snow. It is darker, more like weathered stone, reflecting only a small portion of what it receives. And yet, even that small return can feel luminous to a resting mind, because night gives it room. In the daytime, the moon can disappear into the blue, not because it is gone, but because the sky is already filled with brightness. At night, contrast does the work. The world dims and the moon becomes noticeable. If you imagine moonlight sliding across a windowsill, it helps to remember that your eyes are adjusting too. The pupils widen, the brain amplifies. The scene becomes legible in low light. You don't have to strain. Your body is designed for this, designed to soften into darkness. The moon's light also changes dramatically with its phase. A full moon can feel surprisingly bright, while a half moon can seem much dimmer, even though half the face is still lit. It's not only about how much is illuminated, but about angles, how sunlight strikes the surface and how it scatters back toward us. The same world, the same dust and rock, and yet a different kind of glow depending on geometry. Tonight, you don't need to memorize any of this. You can let it be a quiet explanation for a familiar experience. The moon brightens and fades as it moves, and you can do something similar. You can brighten with a thought and then let it fade. You can notice a worry and then let it dim like a cloud passing in front of the moon. The important thing is not the brightness, but the calmness of the pattern. Nothing snaps on, nothing breaks. The light simply changes, and the night continues to hold you. So let the room be dim. Let the moon's borrowed light remain outside, steady and patient. And let your own mind begin to borrow that patience too. If you could stretch a long, invisible tape measure from your bed to the moon, it would run astonishingly far. The moon is, on average, about 384,000 kilometers away. It is close enough to feel like a companion, far enough to remain a world of its own. Its size is easier to picture in contrasts. The moon's radius is about 1,740 kilometers, making it much smaller than Earth, less than a third of Earth's width. And still, from here, it can look large, because it hangs in the same sky as everything else you know. It shares your night. It keeps you company in the same dome of darkness. That distance is not fixed. The moon's orbit is not a perfect circle. It draws closer and then drifts farther over the course of each month, and those changes subtly affect how large it appears. Sometimes the moon looks a touch bigger and brighter, sometimes a touch smaller, and your eyes notice even when you are not trying. There is also a very slow change taking place over years and centuries. The moon is gradually moving away from Earth by only a few centimeters each year, a change too small to feel, but real enough to measure. Scientists measure it using reflections, timing how long it takes a pulse of light to travel to the moon and return. The sky becomes a laboratory, and the result is a quiet fact. The dance is slowly widening. But none of this needs to feel unsettling. The key word is slow. The moon is not leaving in a way that matters to your night. It is simply participating in the gentle, long arithmetic of the universe, where small changes accumulate like sand grains piling into dunes. Tonight, let the word distance feel soothing rather than empty. Distance can mean space to breathe. It can mean room for your thoughts to spread out and lose their sharpness. It can mean a horizon that does not demand anything of you. Outside, the moon keeps its faraway orbit. Inside, you are allowed to be close to comfort. The bed supports you immediately, without delay, without measurement, without a tape measure needed at all. Feel the contrast, the vast distance above you, and the simple softness beneath you. Both can exist at once, and both can be calming. And as you drift, you can let the moon remain what it truly is, a distant companion whose steady presence makes the night feel a little more structured, a little more safe. Now, beneath distance and light, there is a quieter force that holds everything together. Gravity. On Earth, gravity feels like weight, like the steady downward pull that keeps you in contact with the bed. But gravity is also the reason the moon stays with us. It is the invisible rule that shapes motion, turning straight lines into curves, turning drifting bodies into companions. The moon is not held up by anything. It is in constant free fall, falling around Earth rather than into it. That is what an orbit is, a continuous falling that never lands, because the sideways motion carries it onward at the same time. And gravity does more than keep the moon in place. It reaches into the oceans. Tides begin as a subtle difference. The moon pulls a little more strongly on the side of Earth that faces it, and a little less strongly on the far side. The ocean responds to that difference by shifting its shape into broad bulges. Earth rotates beneath those bulges, and coastlines pass through them, and the sea level rises and falls as if the planet is breathing. It's tempting to imagine tides as waves that race across the ocean, but they are slower than that. They are long-period movements, a gradual lift and a gradual release. In deep water, you might barely notice. Near shore, you can watch a harbor fill. You can watch rocks appear and vanish. You can watch the edge of the sea move up the sand, pause, and withdraw. If you have ever stood by the ocean at night, you've felt how calming that rhythm can be. And even if you have not, you can imagine it now. The sea does not hurry. It returns on schedule. It is a reminder that the largest things in nature can move gently. Tonight, let your body borrow that lesson. Let your breath become tidal. Inhale, a slow rise. Exhale, a slow fall. If thoughts come, let them come like small ripples on a much larger surface. They don't have to become storms. they can simply pass through. Gravity is still holding you. The bed is still holding you. The moon is still holding its orbit. And you are allowed for once to stop holding everything else. There is another quiet truth in the Earth and Moon relationship. It is not a simple story of one object circling another. Earth and the Moon move together, like two dancers turning around a shared point. That point is the center of mass of the system, a place in space called the barycenter. Because Earth is much heavier, the barycenter lies inside Earth, not at Earth's exact center, but offset. This means Earth itself makes a small wobble as the moon travels, a subtle motion that instruments can detect, even though it feels still beneath your feet. And then there is the moon's most famous habit. It shows us nearly the same face all the time. This happens because the moon rotates at the same rate it revolves around Earth. One spin matches one orbit. Over deep time, gravity and internal friction encouraged this arrangement until it became stable and natural, a kind of synchronization. That synchronization creates a comforting illusion, familiarity. The same patterns of dark plains and bright highlands look back at us. The moon feels like a steady companion because it appears consistent. Yet even here there is softness. Over the course of a month, we see tiny changes in angle, a gentle wobble that lets us peek slightly around the edges. The moon is steady, without being rigid. There is also a quiet layer of timekeeping in this partnership. The moon completes a full orbit relative to the distant stars in a little over 27 days. But the cycle of phases returns closer to 29 and a half because Earth is moving too, carrying you around the sun. Even repetition exists inside a larger motion. Nothing repeats in a perfectly still room because the room is never perfectly still. Tonight, treat your own mind the way the moon treats Earth, with synchronization rather than force. You don't need to clamp down on thoughts. You can let your system find its easiest rhythm. If you notice a small shift in your posture, or a swallow, or a deeper breath, let it feel like the moon's gentle wobble, not a disruption, a settling. The universe is full of stable patterns that were learned slowly, and sleep is one of them. So let your breathing set the tempo, let your muscles accept their own weight, let your attention become narrower, quieter, more lunar, steady, simple, and calm. And as you breathe, letting the room settle around you, you can let your mind drift upward again, from gravity in your chest to geometry in the sky. Because the moon's most noticeable change is not its distance, but its light. The moon is always half illuminated by the sun, the way any round world must be in sunlight. What changes is the angle between sun, moon, and earth, and the angle between the lit half and your eyes. At new moon, the bright half faces away from us, and the moon stays close to the sun's direction in the sky, almost hidden in that shared brightness. Then, night by night, a thin crescent appears, low after sunset, like a quiet curve drawn with care. The crescent thickens, becomes a half moon at first quarter, then swells into a gibbous shape, and eventually becomes full. A full moon feels like a steady lantern, but even then, nothing has turned on. It is only alignment, a simple accident of angles, and after full, the light retreats again, waning through gibbous and quarter and crescent until the moon slips back into darkness and begins again. There is a line across the moon that makes all of this feel more textured, even from far away. It's the boundary between lunar day and lunar night, often called the terminator. Near this line, sunlight arrives at a low angle, and shadows stretch long across crater rims and ridges. The surface looks sculpted, as if you could run a fingertip along it. When the moon is full, light arrives more directly. Shadows shrink, and the face looks smoother, flatter, less dramatic. And that becomes a quiet lesson for the mind. Direct attention can flatten everything into a single harsh feeling. Gentle, angled attention reveals depth without strain. Tonight, you don't need to stare at your thoughts. You can notice them the way you might notice the Terminator moving, one detail appearing, then slipping back into darkness without urgency. Somewhere in the background, Earth is moving too, carrying you forward around the sun, which is why the moon's phase cycle does not match its orbit perfectly. Even repetition exists inside a larger motion. So, if you feel that your own nights repeat, but never quite the same, you're not imagining it. That's how real cycles work. Let that be enough for now. The moon is changing shape in your sky, but only by light, only by angle, only by a rhythm that asks nothing from you. You can simply lie here, letting the geometry do what it has always done, while you drift closer to sleep. Now we drift from light to pull, from what the moon looks like to what it quietly does. Tides begin as a difference. The moon's gravity is a little stronger on the side of Earth facing it, and a little weaker on the far side. That subtle gradient is enough to reshape the oceans into broad, gentle bulges, one roughly toward the moon and one roughly opposite. It can help to picture the ocean as slow to respond, like a deep blanket that moves only when a steady hand lifts it. Tides are not sudden waves racing across the sea. They are long-period motions, hours of gradual rising, a pause, and hours of gradual falling. As Earth rotates, coastlines pass through the tidal bulges. That is why many places experience 2 high tides and 2 low tides in a day. The water is not chasing the moon like a creature following a lamp. The water is being shaped, and the land is turning through that shape, like a wheel rolling through a shallow puddle. Near shore, the tide becomes visible. A harbor fills, a beach widens. Rocks appear, then vanish again. The edge of the sea moves up the sand, pauses, then withdraws, leaving a glossy line that reflects starlight and streetlight and sometimes the moon itself. The sun participates too. It is far away, but enormous, and its gravity contributes to the ocean's rise and fall. So the tide is a blended rhythm, a harmony of influences, yet it remains reliable enough that people have trusted it for centuries, and animals have tuned their lives around it without needing to understand it at all. Tonight, you can borrow the tide as a breathing lesson. Inhale and feel the body rise slightly, ribs expanding like a shoreline receiving water. Exhale and feel everything settle back, the way a tide recedes and leaves the sand smooth again. If a thought arrives, let it arrive like a small wave. If it retreats, let it go without following it out. The ocean does not cling to its own water. It releases and returns. Above the sea, the moon continues its orbit without effort, and below it, the planet keeps turning. You do not have to keep anything moving. You only have to let yourself be carried by the slow, reliable rhythm that is already here. Some nights, the tide feels a little stronger, reaching farther up the shore. Other nights, it feels gentler, as if the sea is breathing more quietly. The reason is alignment, the same geometry that creates the phases. When the sun, earth, and moon line up at new moon and full moon, the sun's pull and the moon's pull reinforce each other. The tidal range grows with higher highs and lower lows. When the moon is at first or last quarter, the pulls are closer to right angles, and the range becomes smaller, a softer rise and fall. There is also a subtle shift in timing. Because the moon moves along its orbit while Earth rotates, the tide schedule does not repeat on a perfect 24-hour clock. The sea keeps a lunar rhythm, sliding later day by day. You can live your whole life without tracking it, and still the ocean will keep its appointments. And the ocean is not one smooth bowl. Continents interrupt, seafloors slope, bays narrow and widen. Water has inertia, and basins have their own natural ways of sloshing. That is why the same lunar pull can produce dramatic tides in some places and modest tides in others, and why some coastlines experience an uneven pattern, a higher high tide followed by a lower high tide, like a heartbeat with alternating strength. Yet beneath the local complexity, the cause remains calm and consistent. A distant body pulls, a planet spins, water responds. The result is rhythm, not chaos. If you notice variation in your own nights, treat it the same way. Some nights, the mind runs higher. Some nights, it settles quickly. Some nights, you drift in and out, half awake, half dreaming. These are internal tides, shaped by the day you've had, by light and caffeine and stress and habit, by countless small influences you don't need to list. You don't need to fix the tide to let it be real. You don't need to command it into perfection for it to be soothing. You can let it be slightly different each night and still trust the overall pattern. So let your breathing keep its slow rise and fall. Let your eyelids feel heavier. Let the room blur at the edges. Outside, the ocean breathes under the moon. Inside, you are allowed to breathe the same way and let sleep arrive in its own time. Tides do more than move water. Over long spans of time, they move energy quietly, as if the world is paying a tiny fee for every rotation. As tidal bulges rise and fall, they rub against coastlines and the seafloor. That friction turns a small part of motion into heat, spreading energy through the ocean. It's too subtle to feel on any single night, but physics keeps its books carefully, and over millions of years, the accounting becomes visible. Because Earth rotates, the tidal bulges are dragged slightly ahead of the line between Earth and Moon. Those bulges then pull on the Moon, not only inward, but forward along its orbit, a tiny nudge in the direction it is already moving. That forward pull gives the Moon a little energy, lifting it into a slightly larger orbit, while Earth loses a tiny amount of rotational energy, making the length of a day very gradually increase. We know this is happening because we can measure it. Light can be used like a ruler. A pulse can be sent outward, reflected back, and timed. The round trip is short in human terms, only a couple of seconds, and yet it carries a quiet truth. The distance changes year by year, by a small amount that accumulates over time. There's something soothing about that style of change. Not dramatic, not sudden. A slow drift, almost like breathing, almost like the way sleep arrives when you stop demanding it. Your own recovery works by accumulation, too. A single good exhale doesn't solve everything, but it helps. A single calm night doesn't erase the past week, but it restores something real. Sleep repairs in layers, quietly, like a tide, polishing a stone. So tonight, let yourself be gradual. Let your mind drift in increments. If you feel yourself slipping toward sleep, you don't have to hold on to stay awake. And if you're still awake, you don't have to force yourself to drop. Outside, the moon continues its patient arc. The ocean continues its patient breathing. The planet continues turning, paying its tiny friction fee and still arriving at morning. And you can do the same, letting each breath be a small surrender until surrender becomes natural. And now, we return to the moon's most familiar quiet habit, the feeling that it always looks the same. Night after night, we see nearly the same lunar face because the moon rotates at the same rate that it revolves around Earth. One spin matches one orbit, so the same hemisphere faces us most of the time. This is a stable rhythm, a synchronization that was shaped over deep time by gravity and internal friction until turning and orbiting became the same beat. But the same face is not perfectly the same. Over the course of a month, the moon appears to wobble gently like a slow nod. This wobble happens because the moon's orbit is slightly tilted and slightly stretched, and because our viewpoint shifts as the moon moves. The effect is subtle, but real. It lets us peek a little around the edges, as if the moon is quietly showing that stability can include softness. It's also worth remembering what the moon is not doing. The far side is not a permanent night. It receives sunlight just as the near side does. It is hidden from us by synchronization, not by darkness. The moon's surface turns through day and night like any world, only our view is mostly fixed. That fixed view is part of why the moon feels comforting. Familiar patterns return. The same dark plains and brighter highlands look back at us, like a face you recognize without needing to think. And that recognition can guide you now. Your mind is trying to find its stable pattern too. The small shifts in your body, a swallow, a deeper breath, a slight adjustment of the shoulder, are not interruptions. They are you settling into synchronization, the way a system settles when given time. Tonight, you don't have to be perfectly still. You only have to be soft. Let your breathing keep the simplest rhythm in and out, steady but not forced. Let your attention loosen its grip on details. Let the story blur into atmosphere. If sleep arrives here, let it arrive quietly, the way the moon keeps its face toward us without effort. And if you are still listening, that's fine too. The moon doesn't hurry through its phases. It simply follows the path, and the night makes room for every stage. The moon can look like a simple coin from a distance, but when you let your imagination step closer, it becomes a landscape, quiet, cratered, and patiently preserved. Those dark patches you see with the naked eye are called Maria, an old word for seas. They are not water, only ancient plains of cooled lava spread across basins formed by impacts long ago. The brighter regions are the highlands, older crust, lighter in color, and more densely scarred, like pale stone that has been tapped again and again. Because the moon has almost no atmosphere, there is no weather to soften anything, no wind to smooth a ridge, no rain to round a crater. A footprint can last for a very long time. A sharp rim can remain sharp. The surface keeps its history the way a dry book keeps ink. Over billions of years, impacts have ground the top layer into regolith, a powdery blanket of dust and broken rock. Each grain has been struck, fractured, and reworked again and again until the moon's skin became something like ash. Tiny meteoroids still arrive because there is no thick air to burn them away, and over time they keep the surface gently churned. The temperature swings are wide. In direct sunlight, the surface can become intensely hot, and in darkness it can drop to bitter cold because there is no air to carry heat around and share it. Day and night on the moon are not gentle transitions. They are sharp boundaries of light and shadow. Even the silence is part of the physics. Sound needs air, and the moon offers almost none. If you were standing there, the sky would be black even at noon, and shadows would look cut into the ground. You would feel lighter too. The moon's gravity is about 1/6 of Earth's, so each step would lift you more easily, like moving through a gentle dream. And yet, from where you are, all of that harshness becomes calm. You see the moon's face, not its extremes. Distance softens reality into something restful. Tonight, let that be reassuring. Your mind may contain sharp contrasts, too, moments of brightness and moments of dark. But from a little distance, the whole pattern becomes manageable. You don't have to step into every crater. You can observe the landscape without walking it. So, if a thought rises, notice its outline. Then let it become part of the terrain. If another thought follows, let it settle like dust. Your bed is your atmosphere now, your blanket, your shelter, your breathing, the only weather you need. Outside, the moon keeps its silent record. Inside, you can let the record of the day close gently and rest. Sometimes you can even notice that the moon seems more textured on certain nights. When it is not full, the shadows along its day-night boundary stretch farther, and crater rims stand out. It's the same moon, only different lighting revealing depth. And in the same way, you can let tonight's softer lighting reveal your own depth without effort. Then let it fade as you drift. There are rare nights when the geometry of the sky becomes so precise that shadows line up like a whispered coincidence. An eclipse is not magic, though it can feel like it. It is alignment. The sun, the earth, and the moon briefly taking their places in a straight line. The reason eclipses don't happen every month is simple. The moon's orbit is slightly tilted compared to Earth's path around the sun. Most of the time, at new moon or full moon, the moon passes a little above or below the exact line where a shadow would fall. But when the timing is right, and the moon is near the points where its orbit crosses that plane, the shadows can meet. The language of shadows has soft layers. There is the darker central shadow, and there is the lighter outer shadow, where only part of the light is blocked. Even in shadow, there are gradients. In a lunar eclipse, Earth moves between the sun and the moon glides into Earth's shadow. The moon doesn't vanish instantly. It dims slowly, like a lamp turned down, and often takes on a copper or amber hue. That color comes from sunlight filtering through Earth's atmosphere, bent into the shadow and softened, with the shorter blue light scattered away. In a solar eclipse, the moon passes between Earth and the sun, and its shadow draws a narrow path across Earth's surface. Daylight can fade into an eerie twilight. Birds quiet, and a coolness settle on the skin. It is a reminder that the bright world depends on geometry, on where you stand and what blocks the light. Sometimes an eclipse is partial, where only a slice of light is missing, and the change is subtle, as if someone turned the dimmer down one notch. Sometimes it is total, when the alignment is more exact, and the shift feels profound. In a lunar eclipse, the dimming can take hours. In a solar eclipse, the deepest moment is brief, a small pocket of night inside the day. And then, just as quietly, the bodies move on. Shadows pass, light returns. The system keeps moving. Tonight, you don't need an eclipse to feel the comfort of alignment. You can make a smaller alignment right here. Head on pillow, breath in your chest, darkness around your eyes, the day's light behind you. If your mind feels scattered, let it gather, not by force, but by arrangement. Place one thought aside, place another farther away. Leave a clear space in the center. Alignment can be quiet. It can be simply the moment when you stop resisting the night and let the night do what it has always done. Dim the edges, slow the pace, and guide you toward sleep. So, if your thoughts feel dramatic tonight, remember the eclipse lesson. Darkness can cross you without becoming you. You can let it move on and return to the simple certainty of your breath. Let the shadow pass and let the night stay gentle. If you follow the moon far enough back in time, you reach an era when the solar system was young and restless, when worlds were still assembling themselves from debris and heat. One leading idea for the moon's origin begins with a collision. A young Earth, still forming, may have been struck by a body roughly the size of Mars. The impact would have thrown immense amounts of material into orbit, rock and molten fragments circling above the planet in a temporary ring. Over time, that ring gathered itself, clumping and accreting until it became one companion body. At first, the moon would have been hot, possibly covered by a global magma ocean. As it cooled, heavier minerals sank and lighter minerals floated, building a crust like a skin forming on cooling lava. Impacts continued, carving basins and scattering ejecta. Later, lava flooded some of the low areas, creating the dark Maria you see today. And then gradually, volcanic activity dwindled, leaving the moon mostly geologically quiet. A world that keeps old scars instead of erasing them. The story has uncertainty at the edges, because deep time is hard to reconstruct. But the broad arc is comforting in its shape. Chaos becoming order, fragments becoming a sphere, heat becoming stone, motion becoming a steady orbit. There is a gentle mirror in that arc. Your day may have felt like debris, messages, decisions, scenes, and interruptions scattered through the hours. But the mind has its own way of accreting. It gathers the fragments, sorts them, and stores what matters, often while you sleep. In the night, the brain doesn't simply turn off. It changes state and cycles, strengthening some memories, letting others fade, and smoothing the emotional charge of certain moments. You could think of it as cooling, letting the molten confusion of the day crystallize into something stable. And your own night has a similar generosity. In deeper sleep, the brain's activity becomes slower and more synchronized, like wide waves rolling across a quiet sea. Later, in dream sleep, the mind becomes more vivid again, and images can rise without being invited. So tonight, let your thoughts be fragments that no longer need to float. Let them settle into place. Let what is heavy sink. Let what is light rise and drift away. If a plan appears, you can set it gently on a shelf for tomorrow. The moon you see now is the peaceful outcome of a violent beginning, shaped by time into steadiness. And you, too, can allow time to shape you, not through struggle, but through rest. Feel your breathing slow, as if the whole system is cooling. And in that cooling, let sleep begin to gather itself. Rest is your accretion. It gathers what was scattered and makes it coherent again, quietly, while you do nothing at all. You can trust that process, the way you trust the moon to return. For most of human history, the moon was not only a light in the sky, it was a calendar, a guide, a repeating measure that anyone could read. A month is named for the moon because the cycle of phases gives a natural length of time. A new crescent appears, grows, becomes full, and fades again. A rhythm easy to track without instruments. Many cultures built lunar or lunisolar calendars, sometimes adding an extra month now and then to keep the seasons aligned. Others kept the moon's months as their primary rhythm and allowed the year to drift through the seasons, trusting the sky more than the sunlit schedule. Along coasts, the moon's pull became practical knowledge. Tides mattered for fishing, travel, trade, and safety. People learned that certain phases brought larger tidal ranges, that timing shifted, that harbors filled and emptied on a reliable cadence. Without needing equations, they learned the pattern by living beside it, the way you learn the pattern of your own breathing by simply being alive. Even inland, moonlight-shaped nights. It lengthened the time you could walk without a lamp, the time you could work, the time you could gather. It also shaped stories, because a repeating light invites meaning. The same crescent returns, the same full face rises, the same cycle renews itself. In many places, a bright full moon meant travel was easier, paths were clearer, and the night felt less unknown. Tonight, you don't need the moon to plan your month, but you can let it offer something simpler, reassurance that time can be measured without urgency. The moon does not rush through its cycle. It never tries to skip a phase. It never apologizes for being thin or dim or hidden. You can borrow that kindness toward yourself. You do not have to be at your fullest to be valid. You do not have to be bright to be steady. You can be a thin crescent of energy and still belong to the rhythm. So let your night be a phase, not a verdict. Let your rest be part of a cycle, not a test. And as your mind loosens its grip, imagine the sky keeping time for you, quietly, reliably, without demanding anything in return. Sailors once used the moon for navigation as well, watching its position among the stars, measuring angles, building confidence that the sky could be read like a map. Farmers watched the brightening and dimming and used it as a marker a way to feel where they were in the month. Even when the details were wrapped in tradition, the foundation was observation, a repeating pattern that returned faithfully. Tonight, you can keep it simple. The moon is a timekeeper that does not hurry. It gives you permission to be in your own phase, whatever it is. A quiet crescent of attention, a half-lit mind, a full round calm. And as you sink deeper into the bed, you can feel yourself rejoining the oldest schedule of all, night following day, and sleep following wakefulness again and again with no need to rush. Now, as the moon keeps its calm schedule outside, you can let your attention come closer again, back to the soft, immediate world of the room. The strange thing about lunar physics is that it is both enormous and gentle. A sphere of rock far away can lift entire oceans and slowly change the length of a day. Yet it does it without noise, without visible effort, without asking to be noticed. Its influence is steady, incremental, and patient. And that is exactly the kind of influence you want from sleep. Sleep does not arrive by force. It arrives by drift. Your brain shifts through stages. Your body releases tension. Your breathing deepens, and the mind's sharp edges soften. The day's fragments settle. The nervous system leans into safety. Over time, the cumulative work of many nights repairs what one night cannot. So, if you are still awake, let that be fine. You are not behind. You are simply in the earlier part of the cycle, still close to the day's warmth. If you are drifting, let yourself drift without commentary, like a small boat letting go of the dock. You can imagine the moon's terminator line again, that boundary between light and dark moving across a cratered surface. Your own awareness has a boundary too, wakefulness on one side, sleep on the other, and between them a soft twilight, where thoughts become less coherent, where time becomes less strict, where the room feels farther away. You don't need to push yourself across that boundary. You can let it pass over you, the way the lunar night passes over the moon, the way a shadow moves across sand. Take a slow breath in and a longer breath out. Let the exhale feel like the tide receding. Let your eyelids rest heavier. Let your face smooth. Let your hands relax. Fingers no longer holding anything, even in imagination. Outside, the moon continues its orbit. Inside, you continue your own quiet turning toward stillness, toward safety, toward sleep. And in the next part of our journey, we'll keep following the moon's gentle motions, the small wobbles, the long drifts, and the quiet ways the night sky teaches patience. You may notice that the body starts to feel heavier right before sleep, as if gravity has increased. It hasn't. The muscles are simply letting go. The face slackens. The tongue rests. The eyes stop scanning. And when sleep deepens, you may move through waves of rest, deeper, lighter, deeper again, repeating in cycles through the night. Even if you wake briefly later, that can be part of the rhythm, like the tide pausing at its peak before turning. You can let it happen without turning it into a problem. For now, let the story fade slightly at the edges. Let the room become less important. Let your breathing become the main narrative, steady and quiet. The moon will keep its orbit, the ocean will keep its breathing, and you can keep letting go, one small release at a time. The moon can feel steady, as if it is pinned to the same patch of sky, yet when you watch long enough, you begin to notice a gentle looseness at the edges. Over the course of a month, the moon seems to nod and sway, a slow wobble that is easy to miss unless you're looking for it. This is not the moon being indecisive. It's simply the way orbits work when they are slightly tilted and slightly stretched, and when our viewpoint is always changing. The moon turns in a synchronized way, showing us nearly the same face, but the angle shifts just enough to reveal a little more of one side, then a little more of another, like a quiet conversation carried by small gestures. That wobble has a few causes layered together. Because the orbit is elliptical, the moon speeds up slightly when it is closer and slows down slightly when it is farther. Because its rotation is steady, the changing speed makes the view rock gently side to side. Because the orbit is tilted, we also get a subtle up and down nod over the month. You don't need to keep the terms. You only need the feeling, steadiness with softness built in. Its distance changes too. Some nights it is a little closer, some nights a little farther, because the orbit is not a perfect circle. When the moon is closer, it can appear a touch larger, a touch brighter, and when it is farther, it becomes a little smaller, a little more delicate. The difference is real, but mild, like the difference between two quiet lamp settings. It is the kind of difference you notice only if you are paying gentle attention, the way you might notice the difference between two breaths. And then there is the horizon trick. A moon rising behind buildings can look enormous, as if it has grown during the day and is now lifting itself into view. High overhead, the same moon can look smaller, like a coin pinned to dark velvet. Your brain uses context to judge size, and the horizon gives it context. Trees, rooftops, distant lights. The sky overhead offers fewer reference points, and the mind scales the moon down. The moon has not changed. The measuring stick inside your perception has. Tonight, let that be a soft permission slip. If your day looked huge while you were inside it, and smaller once you step back, that isn't a contradiction. It's perspective doing what it does. The mind is always interpreting, always framing, always trying to make a complete picture from partial information. So, when a thought rises up now and feels too large, remember the moon near the horizon. It can look enormous and still be the same object it always is. It can fill your view without actually filling the sky. Let the thought be large without treating it as permanent. Feel your breathing, slow and steady, like the moon's repeating motion. A small wobble does not break an orbit. A small shift in attention does not break your rest. You can wobble gently toward sleep and still be held in the same calm path again and again. There is another kind of motion in the Earth and Moon system, so slow it's almost like a secret. Tides do not only lift water, they also move energy. As the ocean swells and recedes, it rubs against coastlines and the seafloor. That friction turns a little of the system's movement into heat, a quiet warming dispersed through miles of water. The energy has to come from somewhere. Over long time, it comes from Earth's rotation. The result is subtle, but steady. Earth's spin slows by tiny amounts, and the moon, in return, drifts outward into a slightly larger orbit. It is a trade of momentum between partners. The moon gains a little, Earth gives a little, and the whole dance widens so gradually that it feels like stillness when you live inside it. We know this because we can measure it with light. Reflectors left on the moon act like a return address for a beam. A pulse can be sent from Earth, reflected back, and timed. The round trip is only a couple of seconds, but it carries a message written in distance. Year by year, the number shifts by a small amount, and the small amount adds up. The universe becomes something you can read with patience. This is the tempo of the deep world. Not right now, but over time. Not all at once, but a little, repeated. And that is also the tempo sleep uses when it repairs you. One night helps. Another night helps again. The body balances chemistry, restores tissue, sorts memory, and calms stress not through a single dramatic event, but through repetition. Sleep is a slow accountant, too, keeping its own books, adding up the quiet benefits of many evenings until you wake and realize, almost casually, that you feel a little more like yourself. So, if you feel tired, do not demand an instant solution. Let yourself think like tides, a little in, a little out. A gradual settling of the whole system into a calmer state. Outside, the moon is drifting away by the smallest of margins, and still it remains close enough to guide oceans. Inside, you are drifting away from the day by the smallest of margins, and still your life remains intact. The day can recede without needing a farewell speech. Take another slow breath. Let the exhale be longer than the inhale. Let your muscles soften like coastlines at high tide, then relax like sand as the water withdraws. Change can be real even when it is gentle, and tonight, gentleness is enough. There is a small mechanical picture that makes this easier to imagine. Earth spins, and the ocean's bulges are dragged a little ahead, like fabric pulled slightly forward on a moving belt. The moon feels that forward pull, gains a little energy, and climbs outward. Earth pays the price by slowing the way a top slows when it shares its motion with something else. And still, despite all this exchanging, the rhythm remains dependable. The tide still returns. The moon still rises. The night still arrives. The changes are slow enough to be gentle and gentle enough to let you sleep. If we widen the view again, the moon becomes more than a light and more than a tide maker. It becomes part of Earth's long balance. Earth is tilted, and that tilt gives you seasons. It changes how sunlight falls across the planet, how long a day feels in winter and summer, and where warmth gathers. The tilt is not a dramatic lean, just enough to shape the year into patterns you can feel in your skin. Over very long spans of time, a planet's tilt can wander. It can wobble like a spinning top that slowly changes the direction it points. Earth does wobble. The axis traces a slow circle through the sky over thousands of years, a motion called precession. The stars that seem north change over ages, even though nights feel the same from one human lifetime to the next. Earth's orbit and tilt also shift subtly in other ways, changing how sunlight is distributed across latitudes over long cycles. These are quiet, patient rhythms, the kind that shape climate slowly rather than suddenly. Nothing in the night sky is in a hurry. Many scientists think the moon plays a stabilizing role in this bigger picture, helping keep Earth's tilt from swinging too wildly over deep time. This is not a single cause and not a perfect lock. It is more like a companion that changes the rules of the wobble, encouraging moderation, making extremes less likely. A companion can steady you the same way, not by controlling you, but by shaping the conditions around you so that the mind doesn't tip so easily into its sharpest angles. Even if you never think about axial tilt during your day, it is soothing at night to remember that your world has layers of stability built into it. The moon is part of that architecture. It influences the way Earth turns, the way oceans move, and perhaps even the long-term steadiness of seasons. And you, too, have architecture. Your nervous system has balancing mechanisms. Your breath affects your heart. Darkness affects your brain's timing. A slower exhale can tell the body quietly that it is safe. So tonight, let the small inputs be gentle. A cooler room, a softer face, a jaw unclenched, a breath that takes its time leaving your chest. Imagine Earth from far away, a quiet sphere with a slight tilt, turning through black space, wrapped in thin air, with oceans glinting faintly, and beside it, the moon circling, steadying, pulling, drifting, repeating. The lesson is not grandeur. The lesson is steadiness. Big systems can be stable. Change can be slow. A rhythm can hold. If your thoughts feel like they want to wobble into worry, let them wobble harmlessly in a wide circle. You do not need to snap them back into place. You only need to keep breathing and let the system settle. The moon's calm physics is not about power. It's about patient influence. And that kind of influence is exactly what sleep is. Patient, quiet, and deeply real. Humans have always sensed that the moon keeps time, even before anyone could explain why its schedule is so reliable. A month in many languages and traditions, is tied to the moon's cycle, the waxing crescent, the bright half, the full lantern, the thinning curve. Each phase is a marker you can read without instruments. Some calendars were built directly on these phases. Others blended lunar months with solar seasons, adding adjustments now and then so that harvests and holidays stayed in step with the year's warmth and cold. Before electric light, moonlight shaped what nights felt like. A bright moon made travel easier, gatherings longer, paths clearer. A dark moon made the world feel more private, more inward. Even the sounds of night can seem different under brighter light. A street that feels open, a park that feels visible, a shoreline that glints. Along coasts, the moon's rhythm became practical knowledge. Tides mattered for boats, for fishing, for safe passage. People learned the pattern by watching, the way you learn a friend's habits by spending time together. No equations required. The sea rises, it falls, it returns. And then, in the modern age, the moon became a place we could touch briefly through machines and a few human footsteps. We left instruments, reflectors, and small artifacts that still sit in silence. Yet the moon has not become less mysterious. It is still far enough to be other. It still holds its history on the surface, preserved in dust and crater rims, with almost no weather to erase it. The sky keeps offering its quiet demonstrations. Phases continue. Eclipses happen when alignment is right. The moon rises and sets and changes its hour, reminding you that the night is not a static backdrop, but a moving scene. Tonight, you don't have to make meaning out of it. You can let the moon be what it is, a clock you don't have to wind, a light you don't have to switch on, a rhythm you don't have to manage. If your mind is trying to schedule tomorrow, you can let it. Then you can set the schedule down. The moon does not worry about tomorrow's phase. It simply keeps moving. The ocean does not worry about the next tide. It arrives and leaves. Your body does not need a committee meeting to decide to sleep. It only needs the conditions to be kind. So let the conditions be kind. Let the room be dim. Let your breath slow. Let your attention rest in your chest, rising and falling like a small shore. Outside, the moon continues to keep time for the whole planet. Inside, you can let time loosen its grip and allow yourself to drift into the part of the night where clocks are less important than comfort. Even now, with screens and schedules and bright cities, the moon's cycle is still the same old clock above the noise. You can ignore it for weeks and then look up once, and it is still there in its phase, as if it never left. That reliability is a quiet comfort you can borrow tonight. Now, we come back to the simplest rhythm you have, the one that has been with you since your first day, breath in and breath out. Somewhere above you, the moon is still doing what it has always done. It is turning in its steady way, traveling its path, reflecting a small portion of sunlight back into the night. It is pulling on oceans you may never see tonight, lifting them by a quiet amount, then letting them fall again. It is part of the slow trade that slightly widens the orbit and slightly slows the turning of the planet. All of it is real, and none of it needs your attention to continue. That's the comfort the world holds itself. You can let your mind stop holding for a while. If you are still awake, let your awareness become narrower, softer, less interested in details. The story can blur now, like moonlight behind thin cloud. You do not need to remember the names of motions. You only need the feeling that motion can be calm, and that calm can be dependable. Feel the weight of your body. Notice how the bed supports you without effort. Let your hands rest, fingers loose. Let your face smooth. Let your tongue rest in your mouth as if it has found the easiest place to be. If a thought arrives, give it the same treatment you give the moon on a busy night. You notice it. You let it pass through your field of view. You don't chase it down the street. You let it continue on its orbit. Breath in, a small rise. Breath out, a slow fall. In the night, your sleep will come in waves. You may drift into light sleep, then sink deeper, then rise again, repeating through the night like tides returning to shore. If you wake briefly later, that can be part of the rhythm, a small crest before the next gentle descent. You don't need to label it. You don't need to fix it. You can simply return to breathing. Imagine a shoreline at night. The water comes in, pauses, and goes out, leaving the sand darker and smooth. Imagine that your thoughts are foam on the edge of that water. They appear briefly, then dissolve. The ocean remains. The moon remains. And you remain, too, safe, warm, and allowed to rest. As the minutes pass, your brain will do its quiet work. It will shift states, dim certain networks, strengthen others, and allow the body to repair. You don't need to supervise. Sleep does not require your management. It only requires your permission. So give it permission now. Let the night hold you. Let the moon keep time outside your window. Let your breath keep time inside your chest. If it helps, picture the last thing you would see if you stepped outside. A calm sky, the moon somewhere in it, steady and indifferent to hurry. Then bring that image back into the room, as if you've carried a small piece of the night in with you and placed it beside the bed. Nothing more is required. Good night.